In the quietest corners of the world, where the streets are empty after dark and neighbors know every name, some crimes don't just fade away. They linger, like shadows that never leave. In August 1982, Wells Gray Provincial Park in British Columbia was a picture of wilderness serenity. Towering evergreens, glassy lakes, and mountains standing silent over it all. The park was a haven for families seeking peace, adventure, and the simple joy of nature. That summer, the Johnson and Bentley families, Bob and Jackie, their daughters Janet and Karen, and George and Edith, planned a camping trip together. They were close-knit, known for their warmth and generosity in the small town of Clearwater. Clearwater was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. The Johnsons and Bentleys were active in the community, attending church, volunteering, and always ready to lend a hand. Their absence would soon send shockwaves through the town. The families set up camp near a quiet lake, surrounded by towering trees. They laughed, cooked over the fire, and explored the trails, unaware of the darkness that would soon descend. Days passed with no word. Friends grew anxious. Calls went unanswered. The family's absence was impossible to ignore. Soon, a search party was organized. Volunteers, police, and park rangers combed the vast wilderness, calling out their names. Flyers were posted on telephone poles. Local radio stations broadcast urgent pleas for information. The community gathered at the church, lighting candles and praying for the safe return of their friends. The search stretched on for weeks. Helicopters swept over the dense forest. Divers scoured the lakes. Every lead ended in heartbreak. The wilderness, once inviting, now felt endless and menacing. On September 13, 1982, a mushroom picker stumbled upon the charred remains of their campsite. The scene was nightmarish. Ashes, twisted metal, and the unmistakable stench of burned flesh. Police cordoned off the area and news crews arrived, their cameras capturing the horror that had invaded paradise. What police found in the ash was horrific: 2 burned vehicles containing human remains. The investigation revealed they had all been murdered and their bodies set on fire to hide the crime. Forensic teams worked day and night, sifting through debris for clues. The press dubbed it the Wells Gray Park Murders. Headlines screamed across Canada, and fear rippled through every small town. The investigation was painstaking. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people, followed up on tips, and reconstructed the family's final days. But the killer had vanished, leaving almost no trace. For nearly a year, the case grew cold, but whispers in Clearwater began to circle around one man, David Shearing. The town was gripped by fear and suspicion. Parents kept their children close. Doors were locked at night. Rumors spread. Was the killer a stranger or someone they knew? Shearing, a local with a history of petty crimes, had been seen in the area around the time of the murders. Eventually, he confessed in chilling detail. He had come upon the family's campsite, shot them, and kept the 2 young daughters alive for days before killing them as well. His motivation was a disturbing mix of opportunism and sexual violence. The details of the crime shocked even seasoned investigators. The community mourned not just the loss, but the innocence that was stolen from their town forever. In 1984, Shearing pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. To this day, the Wells Gray Park murders haunt Clearwater, not only for their brutality, but for the way they pierced the heart of a close-knit town that had never imagined such horror in its midst. The families were laid to rest in a service attended by nearly everyone in Clearwater. Tears fell, hands were held, and the pain was shared by all. In the years that followed, the story of the Wells Gray Park murders became a warning whispered to children and a scar on the soul of the town. The park, once a symbol of peace, now carried a shadow that would never fully lift. Yet, every summer, families still return to Wells Gray, drawn by its beauty and the hope that light can overcome even the darkest of tragedies. But for Clearwater, the memory lingers. An echo in the trees, a chill in the night air, a reminder that even paradise can be shattered. The Wells Gray Park murders remain one of Canada's most haunting crimes. A story of innocence lost, a community forever changed, and a wilderness that we'll never forget. In the heart of Kansas, where endless prairies meet the sky, lies the small town of Iola. In 1913, it was a place of horse-drawn wagons, lantern-lit streets, and neighbors who gathered at the general store to share news and gossip. Life moved slowly, and the world felt safe, until one autumn night changed everything. The Showman family, William, his wife Pauline, and their 3 young children, were well known in Iola. William worked at the local mill, Pauline baked bread for church socials, and the children played in the dusty streets with friends. Their modest home stood at the edge of town, surrounded by fields of golden wheat. On the evening of October 30th, 1913, the Showmans shared a simple supper by lamplight. Outside, a chill wind swept across the prairie, rattling the windows. As the family prepared for bed, no one could have imagined the horror that was about to unfold. The next morning, a neighbor noticed the house was strangely silent. The curtains were drawn, and no smoke rose from the chimney. When he knocked, there was no answer. He pushed open the door and stumbled upon a scene of unimaginable violence. The weapon was an axe, left behind at the scene. The attack was so vicious that neighbors later recalled the sound of blows echoing in the still night. News of the murders spread quickly. Townspeople gathered in hushed groups, their faces pale with fear. The local sheriff arrived, followed by a handful of deputies and the town doctor, who confirmed the grim reality. The crime had an eerie familiarity. It was almost identical to the Iola Axe Murders in Iowa the year before. Investigators suspected a transient killer moving from town to town. The sheriff examined the house for clues. There were no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked from the inside and nothing appeared to be stolen. The only evidence was the bloodied axe, left leaning against the wall. Panic swept through Iola. Parents kept their children close. Doors were bolted at night, and men took turns patrolling the streets with lanterns and shotguns. The sense of safety that once defined the town was shattered. The motive seemed to be pure violence. Suspicion fell on a drifter named William Mansfield, a man linked to other axe murders in the Midwest. But nothing was ever proven. Mansfield was a shadowy figure, rumored to travel by rail and vanish into the night. Some believed he was responsible for a string of similar murders across the Midwest, including the infamous Villisca case. But evidence was scarce, and Mansfield always seemed to slip away before the law could catch him. Investigators from nearby towns arrived, comparing notes and searching for patterns. Newspapers across Kansas and Iowa ran sensational headlines, warning of a killer on the loose. The fear was contagious, spreading far beyond Iola's borders. Mansfield vanished, and the case faded into local legend. For decades, the story was whispered at Iola's diners and church socials, always with a shiver. The Showman family was laid to rest in a somber funeral, the entire town in mourning. Black ribbons hung from doors, and church bells tolled in the cold autumn air. The tragedy left a scar that would never fully heal. As years passed, the story of the Iola Axe Murders became a warning whispered to children and a ghost story told on stormy nights. Some claimed to see shadows moving in the old Showman house, or to hear the distant echo of footsteps on the porch. The Iola Axe Murders remain unsolved, a chilling reminder that even the smallest communities can harbor the darkest secrets. To this day, the case is a cold shadow over Iola. The Showman family's graves are tended by descendants and strangers alike, and every so often, a fresh flower appears, left by someone who still remembers, and still wonders who brought terror to their quiet town. Kristin O'Connell grew up in Minnesota, surrounded by lakes, forests, and the warmth of a close-knit family. She was known for her bright smile, her kindness, and her adventurous spirit. Friends described her as thoughtful, independent, and always ready to help others. In the summer of 1985, Kristin was 20 years old and looking forward to her junior year of college. She had recently met a young man while vacationing in Florida, and after weeks of phone calls and letters, she decided to visit him in his hometown of Ovid, New York. Ovid was a quiet, rural town nestled among rolling fields and cornfields, with fewer than 1,000 residents. The kind of place where everyone knew each other, and strangers stood out. Kristin arrived in Ovid on August 13th, greeted by her friend and his mother. She called her own mother to say she had arrived safely, her voice cheerful and excited for the days ahead. The first day passed quietly. Kristin and her friend spent time with his family, shared meals, and talked late into the evening. The small town felt peaceful, almost idyllic, a world away from the bustle of city life. On her second night, August 14th, Kristin left the house barefoot, telling her friend she wanted to take a walk and get some fresh air. The night was warm, the sky clear, and the fields around Ovid stretched out in silence. She was last seen walking down a quiet country road, her silhouette fading into the darkness. No one knows exactly what happened next. When Kristin didn't return, her friend grew worried. By morning, panic set in. A search began. Neighbors, police, and volunteers combed the fields and woods, calling her name. Hours later, her body was discovered in a nearby cornfield. She had been stabbed multiple times, her throat slashed. There were no signs of robbery or sexual assault. The brutality of the crime stunned the community. News of Kristin's murder spread quickly. Ovid, once a place where doors were left unlocked, was suddenly gripped by fear. Parents kept their children close, and neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. The investigation began immediately. State police and FBI agents interviewed dozens of residents, searching for any clue. Roadblocks were set up, and helicopters scanned the fields from above. Despite their efforts, no one admitted to seeing or hearing anything unusual that night. The town went into lockdown, and rumors began to swirl. Kristin's family arrived from Minnesota, devastated and desperate for answers. They pleaded with the public for information, their grief echoing through the small town. Theories multiplied. Some believed Kristin had stumbled upon a drug deal in the fields. Others whispered she had been lured out under false pretenses, or that someone in town knew more than they were saying. Even more disturbing were rumors that multiple people in Ovid knew what happened, but stayed silent to protect one of their own. The silence was deafening, and the sense of trust that once defined the town began to unravel. Investigators followed every lead, but the lack of physical evidence left them with little to pursue. The murder weapon was never found. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no clear motive. Over the years, the case grew colder. Kristin's parents returned home, but never stopped searching for the truth. They wrote letters, hired private investigators, and kept her story alive in the media. Decades later, advances in DNA testing brought renewed hope. Evidence from the scene was re-examined, and new investigators took up the case, determined to find answers. But the case remains unsolved. For Ovid, the murder of Kristin O'Connell is not just an unsolved crime. It is a wound that refuses to heal. The memory lingers in every empty field, every quiet street, every cautious glance between neighbors. Each year, Kristin's family and friends gather at a small memorial in Ovid, leaving flowers and sharing memories. They vow never to let her story be forgotten. For the people of Ovid, the shadow of that August night still hangs over the town. Some lock their doors a little tighter. Others look for answers in the faces of strangers. And for Kristin's loved ones, hope endures. That someday the truth will come to light. Kristin O'Connell's story is a reminder that even the safest places can harbor darkness, and that the search for justice can last a lifetime. Her memory lives on, in the hearts of those who loved her and in the quiet fields of Ovid, where the truth still waits to be found. On the night of August 23, 1987, two teenagers, Kevin Ives and Don Henry, set out for a late-night hunting trip near their hometown of Alexander, Arkansas. The air was thick with summer heat, and the fields around the small town were alive with the sounds of crickets and distant trains. Kevin and Don were best friends, known for their easy laughter and love of the outdoors. Their families trusted them, believing the boys would return before dawn, as they always had. Kevin was 17, a high school athlete with dreams of playing college baseball. Don, just 16, was quiet but fiercely loyal, always ready to help a friend. Their parents, Linda Ives and Curtis Henry, had watched the boys grow up together, fishing in the Saline River, riding bikes down country roads, and working part-time jobs to save for their futures. That night, the boys left Don's house with flashlights and rifles, planning to hunt deer along the railroad tracks that cut through the woods. It was a familiar ritual, a way to pass the long summer nights before school started again. No one could have imagined it would be their last. The next morning, just before dawn, a train conductor reported striking what he thought were two sleeping figures lying side by side on the tracks. The train screeched to a halt, but it was too late. The boys were dead. News of the tragedy spread quickly through Alexander. The Ives and Henry families rushed to the scene, desperate for answers. Police cordoned off the area, and neighbors gathered in stunned silence, unable to comprehend how two boys could die so suddenly, so violently. The initial investigation was brief. Authorities concluded that Kevin and Don had smoked marijuana and fallen asleep on the tracks. Their deaths, a tragic accident. But their families refused to accept this. They knew their sons, and they knew something was terribly wrong. Linda Ives, Kevin's mother, became a force of nature. She demanded answers, organizing rallies and speaking to anyone who would listen. Curtis Henry, Don's father, stood beside her, determined to uncover the truth. Together, they began a fight that would last decades. Independent autopsies revealed signs of foul play. Kevin had been struck in the head, and Don's body showed stab wounds. The boys had not simply fallen asleep. They had been murdered. The families pressed for a deeper investigation. They hired private detectives, contacted journalists, and appeared on national television. The case, once dismissed as a tragic accident, was now a suspected double homicide. The case exploded into a political firestorm when whispers emerged that the area near the tracks was a known drop zone for drug smuggling flights. Rumors swirled about planes landing in the night, unloading mysterious cargo under the cover of darkness. Investigators began to suspect that Kevin and Don may have stumbled upon something they were never meant to see. Theories ranged from drug trafficking to police corruption, and even involvement by powerful political figures in Arkansas. Witnesses claimed the boys may have seen something they weren't meant to see, possibly involving local law enforcement or political figures. Some said they heard gunshots that night, or saw flashlights moving in the woods. The investigation was plagued by missing evidence, conflicting testimonies, and sudden changes in official reports. Files disappeared, and key witnesses recanted their statements or refused to testify. Over the years, numerous witnesses connected to the case died under mysterious circumstances. Some were found dead in apparent suicides or accidents. Others simply vanished. The list of names grew, fueling rumors of a cover-up. The families lived in fear but refused to be silenced. Linda Ives became a relentless advocate, testifying before Congress and demanding federal intervention. The case drew national attention, with journalists and documentary filmmakers descending on Alexander. Despite multiple grand juries and intense media scrutiny, no one has been convicted for their deaths. In Alexander, the case is more than a mystery. It is a symbol of mistrust, unanswered questions, and the belief that powerful people can bury the truth as easily as the bodies of two small-town boys. The tragedy changed Alexander forever. Parents grew wary, locking doors and warning their children to stay away from the tracks. The once tight-knit community was divided by suspicion and fear. For the Ives and Henry families, grief became a daily companion. They visited the boys' graves, left flowers, and clung to memories of happier times. Each anniversary brought renewed pain and renewed determination to seek justice. The case inspired books, television specials, and countless theories. Some believed the boys were accidental witnesses to a drug drop gone wrong. Others suspected a deeper conspiracy, involving law enforcement, politicians, and organized crime. Through it all, the families never gave up. Linda Ives became a symbol of perseverance, her voice echoing in courtrooms and newsrooms across the country. She vowed to keep fighting, no matter how many doors were slammed in her face. Today, the deaths of Kevin Ives and Don Henry remain unsolved. Their story is a warning, a reminder that even in the quietest corners of America, darkness can fall without warning, and justice can be elusive. The memory of the boys lingers in Alexander, in the echo of a train whistle at midnight, in the hush that falls over the town each August, and in the faces of those who still hope for answers. For their families, the fight for truth continues, undimmed by time or fear. In the end, the story of Don Henry and Kevin Ives is not just about loss, but about the courage of those who refuse to let the truth be buried. Their legacy endures, in the questions that remain and in the hope that someday, justice will finally be served. Clearwater, Iola, Ovid, Alexander. Small towns where trust once bound neighbors together, now bound by crimes no one can forget. Like, subscribe and turn on notifications for more true stories that keep you looking over your shoulder. And remember, it's not just the big cities you need to fear. Sometimes the darkest shadows fall where the streetlights never reach.